Again, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon based on where you have joined this webinar from. I do hope and believe that every one of you and your loved ones are safe and well during this testing time. We are going through a very unprecedented time, and hopefully this will not repeat in the history of the world. And post-COVID, I can tell the world is going to have a totally different normal, and it's beyond debate. It's absolutely beyond debate. And as Jamin said, AACE is trying to have more webinars. And if you look around the world, everybody, every organization, even every entity is offering webinars. Some are paid, some are free. So what I'm trying to tell is webinars and broadcasts will be major players on knowledge sharing going forward. And AACE India has taken a leadership role in that, and in fact, they deserve a huge congratulations. I think that's because of the energy the team has. They are doing this wonderful thing, and thank you so much for having me as part of your speaker list. Now, I'm just telling like I'm doing it from my home with the limited IT infrastructure and gadgets. So we have done enough planning to have a very smooth sail. However, if something does go wrong minor, please appreciate that and accept my advance apologies for that. Now, coming to the questions toward we really request if you can hold your questions toward the end of the session. And we have a Q&A session, which is obviously a limited time frame. But if some of you miss to get your questions answered or answered fully, your questions will be captured from the system, and every one of them will be answered in reasonable time. Please rest assured. Now, a brief profile about myself. I've been in the industry for about 35 years in cross-functional roles almost on every facet of projects, right from feasibility studies to FEED, then proposal and tendering for mega projects, and the entire EPC cycle right up to commissioning. And I was also involved in some claims development, partly supporting project controls, and I was actively involved in the project handover as well. So in short, I've covered the entire gamut of project life cycle, touching almost every knowledge area of projects. Now, some areas I was very intimately involved, some areas I was just associated. Now, coming to the geographic locations I was involved on throughout my career, I'm basically from India. Obviously, I spent about 10 years in India. Then the rest of my 24 years I've been spent in Nigeria, a short stint in US, then Bahrain, Qatar, and the longest stretch I had and still have is in Saudi Arabia. And apart from my for-profit engagement with leading business houses and multinational organizations up to project manager and project director for mega projects, I'm also associated with non-profit organizations in project management, cost management. I've listed this thing quickly. You can read through. I'm just under public policy. I'm advising Center for Public Policy Research in India for their industry and energy segment. And I'm also associated at some climate change activities as chairing one of the leading global awards for youth climate. Now, coming to education, I'm very basically an electrical engineer. I would say I forgot an electrical engineering, but very basically I'm an electrical engineer. And I have 2 masters. One was in HR. That was my passion. I chose that. And probably could sound a bit strange, but I believe anybody would be not successful in his life unless he has command on 2 things. One is money, second is people. So I went for that. And second was an MBA in strategic management, supported and encouraged by my employer. I also have a PhD in strategic project management and 3 certifications, including the AACE's CCP. Now, let's get on with the actual business. Let me, first of all, before I start, let me tell you one thing. I believe I know there is a heterogeneous mix of people who are attending this webinar. There are professionals, could be budding professionals, mid-career, some could be some senior people. Then there could be people from academia, both all students, faculties, and research people. But I would assume a major percentage of the audience would be from contractors side. So what I have done is the whole presentation I have put from a contractor's perspective so that majority of the people will comprehend and connect to the system, the ecosystem, and the people around them. And I would from time to time connect it to the other things as well, like from the client side as well, so that those people also can connect. And within this 1 hour, we will do as best as we can. Now, first of all, let me also tell you how this stakeholder engagement. Jayman told we had multiple webinars in this series. And some of you, I think, I'm very happy, some of you have attended practically every one of them, some partially, some of them. But if you look at the history of the webinars we came through, we had the more technical content-oriented parts of project management, be it planning and scheduling, costing and estimating, or could be L value, design delivery, all those things were more technical aspects of project management. Now, let me tell you one thing. Whatever strengths you have and the capabilities you have acquired in these areas can never be capitalized fully if you do not have effective management of your stakeholders. Simply because these are the people who decide, one, your project is completed, it's signed off. Two, how did you conclude? What was the outcome of your project? Yes, you have completed it. Was it a failure, close to a disaster? Or was it a partial success? It met partial objectives expected from the project, or was it a magical success? So that is again decided and endorsed by these people who are the stakeholders. So that is why the stakeholder management is extremely important for the overall success of your project. Now, who are stakeholders? Let's go. This is not rocket science. Let me tell you that frankly, this is no rocket science. Let's go with the very dictionary meaning of a stakeholder. It is just anyone who has any kind of interest in your project. Let's not worry so much about the PMBOK and big things. It's a very simple thing. And they are affected by the project in some way and also with the outcome of the project. If you are doing an infrastructure project for the community, the people who will understand nothing about your project would be a beneficiary of that. Could be a road. The people who are going to drive on that, so they are also going to be stakeholders for that. But unfortunately, they will be invisible during the execution of your project. So there are different categories. We will quickly run through that. And what is stakeholder management? Like any other management, it is again no rocket science, simple. You need to identify the peoples or groups who are the stakeholders. You need to analyze them. The process is much more longer, but I'm putting it at a very high level. You need to analyze their expectations and their impact on the project. And you need to have a management plan and a strategy, because anything you do without a super plan supported with a smart strategy is not going to be an assured success. It might not be a disaster, but it's definitely not going to be an assured success. So it is extremely important that your management plan is developed based on smart strategies and done through some very elaborate plan. Now let's go to the next slide. As I said, there are different types of people in this audience. So I've tried to make it simple for everyone to understand. So if you are very experienced guy, some of these slides might sound very silly, but please excuse me, because we have looked at it from an overall perspective. Now, at the first categorization, it's very simple. You have internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. Even in your own organization, be you a part of a contract organization, you may be part of project control, you could be part of engineering, you could be part of procurement, you could be part of anything. So apart from your team, there are other internal stakeholders who drive or contribute to your outcome. And some of your outcomes could be drivers for other stakeholders. So those are again stakeholders for it. Could be employees, it could be managers, it could be the board of directors, it could be investors, because whatever you do on a project as a contractor, when you lead that thing, ultimately, if the project is going to be a commercial failure, the project might have given the outcome smartly, the customer would have got a beautiful delivery. But if it was a commercial failure or a disaster, it's going to impact your investors. It's going to impact their ROI. So they are very important stakeholders. Then we have external stakeholders. I put again some examples. This obviously these are the people outside your organization. Now, when you look at it, and I put some very simple examples. Clients, customers, suppliers, creditors, local communities, society, government. If you just look at this thing, you will understand something very interesting. When you start a project and finish a project, there are only few stakeholders who are going to be throughout the journey. And many stakeholders get onboarded in between and stay till the end of the journey. Some stakeholders who start in the beginning may get off-boarded in between. Some people get onboarded in between and get off-boarded before the completion. So it is a very dynamic situation. The stakeholder mix is pretty dynamic and diverse. So that is very important for you to be mindful about before we go to the next few slides. Okay. Now I put a different categorization. So first we looked at internal and external stakeholders. Now here I put a different context. See the categories I have put here. I put positive, neutral, and negative stakeholders. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's make sure that every one of you has muted your mic. Just a request, just to make sure that we don't get any noise or disturbance around. Thank you. Now, positive stakeholders are the people who would do anything and everything to make sure that your project succeeds. They will do anything within their rights. They may even go out of the way to make sure that you succeed. And you have some neutral people who are neither here or there. Really not worried about the outcome. They are there because they are there. They have to be there. They are just paid to be there. And they don't worry so much about the thing. If it happens, it's good. They will be part of the party. If it doesn't happen, they're not going to cry. Fine. It doesn't matter to them. Then you have these dangerous characters, the resistors or the negative characters. These people, believe me, will do everything beyond their capabilities and possibilities to make sure that you fail. Can you shoot them down? No, unfortunately. Can you get them removed? Many times no, because you don't appoint them. So as a project manager, what you have to do is you need to strategize how to win these people and turn them around. Preferably to be a positive stakeholder, or at least to a neutral level. Even if they don't do anything good to you, make sure that they don't do anything bad to you, because fighting the bads on your project will need more energy than anything else you need to do. So these are different categorization I have put. Now let's go a different type of categorization. Why I'm giving different categorization is, as I assume there are different types of people in this webinar with different backgrounds. So when I put different types of categorizations, each of you will be able to connect some of these people in some of these categories related to your area. Be you from academia, you be a student, you be a faculty, you be a budding professional, you will definitely be able to connect some of these things to your ecosystem. Now you have got another category, the key stakeholders who take all the decisions on the project. They can make or break your project. These are the people who take the decisions. And the next is people who have nothing much to do with the project, but they may create a lot of noise. These are the people, I call them the nuisance guys of the world, the project management world. They make a lot of noise that it requires attention. And because they make it to get attention, because otherwise they don't have so much relevance. They are just identified as stakeholders. They need visibility. They terribly need visibility because they don't have a major role in the whole thing. That they would do everything possible through noise to get that visibility. Their target is not you. Their intention is to make themselves visible and more heard in the system. But unfortunately, they cannot achieve it without upsetting and being a nuisance to you. So you need to understand these people. And stakeholders with no major say in the project will be impacted by the outcome of the project. This is another deadly category. You know why? They don't have major say in the project. So during the whole project life cycle, you won't see them that visible. Even if they see something, they don't have that authority to say something. And many of these people will not dare to speak out. And when finally the outcome comes, no, this was not the project outcome. This should have been something different. And these guys would have been smelling it earlier. They would never open up their mouth. Again, the target is not you. That is their way of life. But the problem is at 85 to 95% of the project completion, you are getting negative signals that your perceived outcome is not the actual outcome expected out of you. And you imagine the damage to yourself. And then I've also put some casual categories. When you walk through the office corridor, you will hear all these things. These casual things. The money crunchers. We talk about people. These guys will never release the funds. Then there are clueless people. We call some stakeholders clueless, but still think they know everything. And there are some very violent people, and there are very territorial people who do not know or do not want to know what happens right outside the silo. I just put a color-coded circle there. Each triangle has got a kind of a different color, and some of these people will stay only within their territory. They will never want to or dare to come out. And there are some happy and easy people. Now, please give real attention to this slide. Stakeholder register. In one of the earlier slides, I touched the different stakeholders, external stakeholders and internal stakeholders. And I also told that some of these people will get into the project as a stakeholder and get out of the project after completing their role. So what does that mean? It's very difficult for any project managers and his immediate subordinates to keep all these things in their brain or their head. So what you need is a formal approach to the whole thing, which is nothing but a formal stakeholder register. No literature in the world tells you a standard structure for that. It is your own call. What should be there? Now, before I talk about it, I want to tell you my golden rule. Again, it's my golden rule. Not everyone is a stakeholder. This is something very important. And many pretend to be stakeholders are not really stakeholders. It's very, very important for you to know. These people who pretend to be stakeholders and not stakeholders, if you do not identify the fact, you would start servicing their expectations. You may even start recognizing and acknowledging and offering favors for their wish list without really understanding that they are not really your stakeholders. And there are some other dimensions to it. Some of these pretending guys, when you start servicing, it would upset some real stakeholders. And especially when some of the real stakeholders are less powerful than this pretending guy, that the less powerful real stakeholders would not have the opportunity, the forum, and the courage to speak up and tell, dear friend, you have no business here. And as a project manager, you cannot expect other people to identify that. You need to identify that. And one of the ways to do that is making a very formal stakeholder register. Now, I put a simple structure. Again, no rocket science, simple common sense. So I put the project title, the project manager, a date on which it was first developed, and more importantly, when it was last updated. You know why we need that last updated on? The very simple reason the whole scenario is pretty dynamic. So when you have a very dynamic and evolving list, what you need to do is you need to keep updating it on a periodic way. So I put some columns here. The names have to be this. I put AAA1, BB1. I just put that. And some columns where you need some more elaboration, I put some examples. Obviously, name doesn't require elaboration. So when I come to positions, I'm not looking at the actual title, vice president, project controls manager, lead engineer. I'm not looking at the titles. I'm looking at the position to connect with the role. You know, this is a project support person. You could be having a number of people, and that could be financial support people, that could be designers, that could be suppliers, that could be financiers, and could be government people. And the next is which organization they work in. Some of them could be in your own organization. And then I put two examples. Financiers could be a bank or any other lending institutions which finances your project. A government officer could be from a ministry or a local government authority, could be from anywhere, or a ministry of transport when you are working on roads, when ministry of railways, ministry of aviation, when you work on an airport project, it could be from anywhere. And contact, email and phone number fine. And what is the role each of them is doing? Some of them may be just overseeing the process. Some could be, just example, they may smoothen the cash flow for you. And some people focus on integrating the project. Some guys give only the research support. Some guys give a design support. And what is expected? What is required from these people? Some people are expected or required to be there in all activities. Some are required, oh sorry, there is a typo there. Some are required only in design support. Some are required only in project. We have this 5 process of or phases of project from PMBOK. Some may be required only in some of these phases or processes. Some are required only in closeout and handover. The owners operations people, if you are building a refinery or a petrochemical compost or a chemical plant or a steel plant, the operations and maintenance people will be coming in only when you do this closeout. And what is expected from every one of them, and what are their influence and interest? It's important, very, very important. And what are their powers and impact? And at the end, I would love to have the courage to call everybody positive, neutral, and resistant. Now, as a project manager, probably you can hide this column for yourself, for others. Sorry, for others. You can keep it with yours. But as a project manager, you need to have it in this table. When you open something, you need to know what category this guy falls. It is extremely, let us not shy away from the fact that human characteristics are different. It is absolutely different from person to person. And you as a project manager have to unfortunately handle it. And only way to handle it is to demonstrate and show the courage to understand the fact, acknowledge it for yourself and handle it boldly. Obviously, politely, but boldly. Now I have something to help you. I touched power and interest. If we put, let me have some water because I've been talking. Sorry for that. I put all the stakeholders in 4 quadrants. I've taken interest on the x-axis and power on the y-axis. Now, of course, the highest quadrant is both for high, that is high interest and high power. So you definitely need to, this doesn't need any elaboration, you definitely need to manage them very, very closely. and they get fully involved, which is very good in the project, and have the decision-making authority. So that is clear. I don't think you need to elaborate more. Now let's go to the next one, the people with high power but low interest. So you need to keep them satisfied, though they may not involve so much, they may not be very visible, they may not involve themselves so much in every facet of the project, but they have high authority. You know, these people are very dangerous. You know why? They have the power and they will take decisions uninformed, misinformed, or underinformed. Every one of them is probably could be dangerous and disaster for you. They will take the decision based on their information and their understanding of the situation. If that understanding is not correct, because they don't have so much interest and involvement in the project, who pays the price? You pay the price as a project manager. So you need to make sure that these people, though they are not visible, somehow you need to make sure that they are fairly well informed. So you need to see who are the people who feed in the information to these people. Again, you will not learn it from a book. That is a project manager's smartness. You know, I always say, with multiple degrees and certifications, you may not necessarily become a smart project manager. So these are the talents you need to have in you, inborn or acquired, to handle big projects in complex environments. Then we have the third category, low power and high involvement. So some people think that, well, this guy doesn't have much power, so let me not spend too much time after it. I think that is deadly. You know, these people have too much involvement. What happens is the second category, the high power, low interest people, predominantly depend on the third category, low power, high interest people, because these people know everything in and out, but they don't have that power. So the high power, low interest, the guys who will never leave the air conditioned office, but they take the shots, will most likely depend on the low power, high involvement people. See, the high power, high involvement people will never go to low power, high in, because they have the involvement. And the high power, low involvement people will never go to high power and high involvement, because these guys also are powerful. The second category do not want to be exposed about the lack of understanding and knowledge about the project. So they will always depend on the third category. And the fourth is both low. You need to just monitor them. That's all you need to do. So I hope I clarified this four category, because it's very, very important going forward on this presentation, on this webinar. The next is, you need to know your stakeholders. You know, even in our normal human life, how many times people surprise you? And it's those people you thought, it's not even you assumed, you thought, you were dead sure that you know this person inside out. What he can do, what he cannot do, what are his capabilities, what are his limitations, what are their psychological response patterns. You know for sure that these people are well and intimately known to you, and still some of these people will surprise you, because you can never know anybody 100% inside out. And the same thing works here as well, because end of the day you are managing people, you are working with people. So the project managers need to intimately know each and every stakeholders. So of course you may say that within practical limitation, that doesn't work in business. Practical limitation absolutely has got nothing to do with the dollars. That is for convincing yourself and your probably subordinates, and never your superiors. So you need to, by hook or crook, know your stakeholders. And you can use multiple options to do that. You can do formal interviews. You can have informal sessions like coffee meetings. You can have joint walkdowns on the site. You can even have joint travels for anything, may not be necessarily even related to the project. And it could be any other means, socializing, you can golf, you can do anything, but make sure that that is compliant to both organizations' ethics norms. Sometimes something which is compliant to your organization ethic norms might not be compliant to the other parties, and other parties compliant may not be necessarily compliant to you. So you need to make sure, especially when you work in listed companies, even otherwise, you need to be very, very, mindful about the ethical norms within which you need to work. So basically, you need to get to know them, their organization, what issues they have, and very importantly, what assumptions they are making. And there are ways and means, formal and informal ways to understand their assumptions. And what are the bases for them to make those assumptions? And what concerns them? What really concerns them? It's very important. What concerns them? Unless you know what concepts, unless you know the problem, there is no fix. And most importantly, what is most valuable for seeing a project completed and signed off? Is it the most valuable thing? In some time, in some occasion, some project, some of these stakeholders would find value in some specific area which was never given that level of deserving attention, because people didn't know that that was the most valuable thing for that category. And if unfortunately, if that category falls on the top decision making, high power, high involvement, that will make your day terrible. Now let me move to the next slide. Now let's go to the stakeholder engagement process. One thing I want to tell is, we started this thing talking on stakeholder management. Now I'm using a different terminology of engagement. I don't know if you have noticed it. Of late, people are taking more of engagement. The word management is diminishing, and the word engagement is getting more visibility and acceptance. And that is because you need to engage with these people. And for engaging them, of course, PMBOK or anything doesn't give you standard processes, but it is just any management process, which again is not a rocket science. It is, again, I have put the basic 5 bullets, which is you need to identify the stakeholders, you need to analyze them, you need to plan an engagement process based on some smart strategies, and then you need to manage it. And finally, you need to monitor and review during the process itself. You cannot wait for the whole thing to be completed to monitor and review, because any lessons learned have to be implemented in the project itself, not for the next project, because you may not be the project manager for the next one. So don't ever wait for the whole project to be completed. And your job is not to make sure that the future projects are good. Your job is to make sure that your project is good, that delivers. Anything other than that is just secondary to you. Don't worry so much about what value addition you are going to make for the next project manager as lesson to know. Let us not spend our time to give the luxury to someone else to learn from your mistakes. Sorry, that's not what you are expected to. You can do it as a byproduct without even you knowing it. People will anyway do that. You need to learn the lessons from your project. So that is why the monitoring is very, very important, because you need to gain advantage of the monitoring and outcomes of that. Now, now we will go through these 5 steps of the process. First is identifying the stakeholders. Okay, now again, we need to really, first of all, see, when you identify, we go back to the golden rule we touched earlier, which was not everyone is a stakeholder, and there are many people, or there could be people, at least some people, who pretend to be stakeholders and they are not. So this is something I want to emphasize before I start this slide. Now, as we all can imagine, this has to be part of the initiating process of any project. And I've touched, not everyone is a stakeholder. It needs to happen right after the creation of the project charter. We all know at that time you would not know all the stakeholders on the project, but it needs to happen with whatever level of information available at that point of time. They have to be identified in the charter itself, or in the plan, or in both. And we also need a formal stakeholder register. Don't shy away from that. It is a fact. We have different type of people and different type of organizations with different levels of authority, different interest level. There are multiple parameters. It's so diverse and dynamic that it's beyond complexity. It is beyond complexity, and it could be terrible, and it could drive you to chaos. So you need to have formal, and I know many organizations do not have a formal stakeholder. They feel, sometimes it looks awkward. Nothing looks awkward when it comes to dollars. Nothing looks awkward. Show the courage and the professional integrity and the professional firmness to go for these things. And then understand each stakeholder's involvement. What is his influence and ability? Okay, I want to emphasize a bit on ability. Sometimes we see many stakeholders really do not having the ability to perform that role. But unfortunately, you are not the decision maker to put him or her as a stakeholder. So he or she will be continuing as a stakeholder, and you understand that that person doesn't really have the ability to do it by self, nor does he or she have the people, enough resources who have the capability to support him or her. So you need to be very mindful about such people, and especially when they are with high power. And what is the proximity to the project? And another thing I have found invariably is people do not understand the interdependency between the stakeholders. You need to be extremely vigilant about the interdependency and understand that. Even those people, when X is dependent on Y, there is a separate psychological dynamics there. Many of these X's do not want to openly admit that he is dependent on Y. At least some of these Y's are not very happy feeding in the inputs to X to be a smart, blue-eyed voice for the bosses. So this interdependencies, many of the things you understand, you will not speak out, but you do need to understand, because these are valuable inputs for your strategies for the planning, which we will come to. And again, it needs to continue all throughout the project, because I'm again repeating, it's a very dynamic environment. There will be additions or deletions in your list of stakeholders, and your stakeholder register. I'm not talking about updating it every week, but if it is probably it's a 4 years, most of the mega projects will be 3 to 7 years duration. Let's say we take a 4-year-old duration project, it needs to be updated at least every yearly twice, possibly quarterly. So when you onboard a new supplier, there is a change. When there's a deletions, or when a PO or subcontract is closed out, there could be a change. And when there is a movement in the client or contractor organization for key persons. Okay, let me just start. And I missed one thing. I want to help you to understand at least a budding professional, because they might not have come across such situation. When a PO is placed, you are placing a PO or a subcontract to somebody. Let's take a PO for supplying an engineered equipment or a bulk material for a project. So the moment the PO is placed, the guy is a stakeholder. He has some interest on your project. He has some influence on your project. You have some interest on his action. You also should have an influence on his actions. Now, he delivers the equipment. He delivers all the non-material requirement, whether it is documentation, whether it is operation and maintenance manual, whether it is personnel to supervise your construction, to be part of your pre-commissioning team, or driving your commissioning activity. Let's say all these things are done and that equipment is completed. Now you also need to look at the warranty obligations of that project. So some of the warranties could be passed through to you, and if an equipment is commissioned probably halfway through the project and it has got another 1-year warranty period, when you are there, you will have a facilitating role. But if it is a complete pass on warranty to your ultimate client, that guy could be off-boarded because he has no more, you have no interest on his activity because it is now between him and your end client. So he could be off-boarded. But some cases, let's say if he has got a performance warranty, which is passed through you because he has supplied a motor or a compressor or a turbine to your project, which is part of your facility. So that could impact the performance of your facility. So he still will have to continue as an active stakeholder till your complete facility performance runs are done and handed over and signed off. And additions or resignations at key levels, that is another area, when another situation where you will have to revise your register. Now let's look at analyzing the stakeholders. Okay, before you analyze, as the first step in analyzing the stakeholders, it is you need to know their expectations. And when I talk about expectation, there are two types of expectations. One is the rightful expectations, and second is the wish list. First of all, you need to be smart in differentiating between these. And it's tricky sometimes. There could be a very thin line between them in some situations. So it is your job to comprehend what is expected from you through the contract and help them. You cannot go and fight with them. You need to help them to differentiate between them and help them to understand what is their wish list. And next is a resources. Do they have the resources in place to meet the rightful expectations? And next is you have to help the stakeholders for close to perfect alignment of their expectations, because their expectations have to be met by you. Now, as a project manager, you need to be firm and polite. That's the game. You need to be firm and polite. We have seen a lot of project managers who are very firm. We have also seen a lot of project managers who are very polite. You need to have a blend and a very smart balance of these two. So that is very, very important for you. So that covers the analysis part. Then we come to the planning phase of it. Now, when you talk about planning, it is the predecessor for any management or the action. Before the action, you need to have a plan. And sometimes it is more important than the action itself. Because, when you have a very good plan, like anything, now you consider a perfect execution, a partially perfect execution. Even a poor execution will damage your stuff only to a limited situation. But when you don't have a plan correct, and you never use or get an opportunity to revise it throughout the life cycle, you are going to have an assured disaster or a very good failure. A very good or very decent failure is much better than a disaster. So the planning phase is very, very important. Now, a formal plan needs to be in place to conduct the engagement process. In some cases, just to inform the people. In some cases, you need to consult the stakeholders at the right time for specific matters, maybe to plan how to influence them, or maybe and there are different aspects. The plan is a big process. Planning is a big process. There are different components. I just put some parts here. And planning needs to be aligned with the needs, expectations, impact, and influence on the project of each stakeholder. And more importantly, you need to validate the plan, because we will be touching the review process. Based on the review process and the inputs you get from the the reviews and the monitoring and review, you need to dynamically validate the plans as well throughout the project life cycle, because the stakeholder mix is dynamic. So the plan also has to be changing. And in some situations, things will not go as per your plan. So you need to have a corrective plan. Correct? Like you change your baseline schedule, you validate it, keep revalidating it. The same thing happens here as well. The plan shall cover the frequency of engagement as well, because you do not have the luxury of engaging everybody every day. So you need to know, you need to have a schedule, who should be engaged when, one, and how frequently. And also you need to have what is the desired outcome from every engagement. You know, there is no free lunch. Every second you spend should give you an outcome, which could be a complete outcome or a partial outcome, which will be completed later. So every engagement should give you some benefit. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. You need to make sure that you are spending time and not wasting time. You are spending your resources and efforts. You are not wasting your resources and efforts. So it's extremely important to differentiate between spending and wasting. Now let's go to the actual management and engagement part. So it starts obviously from the plan. Basically, it is nothing but putting the plan into an action. And you'll be communicating and working with the stakeholders. And you need to get the best from the stakeholders and minimize any resistance from them. And when you come across, some people will be very visibly negative from the beginning, but some people who sound positive or neutral in the beginning may turn out to be negative in between. So then you need to immediately work on such situations and minimize their impact, negative impact on your project. Ensure that their issues and concerns are addressed unambiguously. The last word is extremely important, because you think it is addressed. No, you need to be double sure that it is addressed. It has to be unambiguous, very, very clear. You should be sure, and the other party also should be sure. And you need to perform it throughout the project life cycle based on the stakeholder style. And we touched, there are different styles for the project stakeholders. Could be some of them are supportive, some are neutral, some are resistant. Based on their style, you need to engage in different ways. Again, is it written in any book? No. You need to learn it from experience. You need to learn it even from experience with a particular stakeholder. You may do mistakes in the beginning, but you can correct yourself if you do very smart engagement. And the last thing is very important. You can't do it alone. You might be leading it. So you need to have the whole team to have a culture encouraging very effective stakeholder engagement. Now, who is there to facilitate that culture? It is you as a project manager to facilitate that culture. Whether you are on the client side or contractor side, it is you as a project manager and the leader of the whole show to facilitate, put up the culture and facilitate that culture. Make sure that people are fairly aligned, if possibly best aligned with that culture. There could be deviations, because end of the day is people. So that is fine. But all the deviations should be corrected as quick as possible. Now, the next thing is monitoring stakeholder engagement. As I said earlier, when we were talking on some of the other slides, the monitoring is very, very important. You should not give the results and the learning from the project only to your future projects and the organizations. No. I am not saying it is criminal, but it is criminal not to use that knowledge for yourself. It is absolutely and terribly criminal if you don't use that knowledge for yourself. Because someone who cannot service himself cannot service anyone else. So that is the fundamental principle in management. You need to service yourself, and that should use every source and resource you should have, you can have. So do it in a very religious way, in a structured way, the monitoring and reviewing, and immediately pass on the learning to the planning and engagement model. So continuous monitoring is required. You need to know when, what, how, what are the KPIs when you monitor. Are you just monitoring, if this guy is smiling good, so he is happy? No, there needs to be KPIs. And when do you want to search? When do you want to search for the the feelers? When do you want to search for the real outcome? So that should be when, what you do, how you do, and what are the KPIs. And validating the plan if required. I touched it earlier. And now apply the learning to revisit the analysis. Even the analysis phase you need to apply. Some of the stakeholder expectations might be wrong. And halfway through the project, you may discover that a key decision maker is not even a stakeholder. And unfortunately, he's taking some of the important shots. He's not a stakeholder. He doesn't get the right information. You don't get an opportunity to meet with him, a date with him, and engage with him. You have no opportunity, but he takes the shots. He takes a shot directly or even indirectly. So you need to make sure that the right decision makers are notified and told, look, dear friend, this person looks to be taking the shot. Unfortunately, he's not identified as a stakeholder. I get no opportunity to engage with him. Either you remove him from taking the shot, taking the shots and this authority, or please bring him into the stakeholder so that I get an opportunity to engage with him and he gets the opportunity to get the facts about the project. And finally, you need to align the stakeholder expectations. Now I have something different. It was very quick. It is a very interesting topic. It's a broad topic. It's like communications. You can do a communication training for probably 1 month. Still, it will not be complete. So this is something similar to that. So we have put the whole thing together in 50 or 55 minutes. I don't know how long did it take. Probably about 50 minutes. So I want to take an example to walk you through the whole stuff we discussed. This Taurus is a beautiful car. I don't know how many of you are familiar. You can Google. It's one of the good models of Ford. It's very elegant and pretty sexy too. I like this car, and I put this picture as well on the top. Now, when you look at the development of this car, I've taken this example outside the EPC project, the design project, infrastructure, but I've taken it outside the general project because I want you to practically apply the learning of the last 50 minutes to something which you are not familiar with, but which you are still, which you can easily comprehend. This Taurus, this was developed multiple times. The first generation Taurus was launched in 85, and the second generation was launched in 96. Any car model development, especially first time, it takes about 3 to 4 years. We all know that. So the first generation was developed because product development is a project. So there was a project manager who was leading that team. And in the first time when it was launched, and I put positives and negatives for both. Let's go with I know you can see both, but please focus on the left side. The guy was great. The project manager was terribly good. He had great cross-functional team because he picked the team by himself. It's not that anybody who was found available. No, found available plus good are part of his team. Not found available alone is a criteria to get into his team. They had very smart concurrent engineering practices. And this is not mine. You can Google it. You will find it as a big story. You will not get it as a bulletized form. You will get it as a big story. And he had very close ties with the automobile industry. It's an assembly of a lot of components supplied by other vendors and subcontractors. So he had very good ties during the development phase with the vendors and subcontractors, and very strong focus on customer need. What do the people need within their budget? A strong synergy with the business objective, with the company's business objective, which is nothing but making money, having better market presence, and whatnot. Again, sorry, let me sip another a bit of water. Okay, sorry. So finally, he had a great product. It was a big hit in the market. You look at the history of Taurus, it was a very big hit. Now, there were some negatives in that. He was fired immediately after the product was the product development was finished and launched, because the project delayed, the development delayed by just 3 months. So he could not meet the schedules. He was fired. So when you analyze it, what went wrong? He was doing a beautiful job, but it was not well communicated to the stakeholders, or probably it was communicated to some of the stakeholders, but not to the ultimate decision makers who were not really happy with the way it was going. and probably who could not really comprehend the value addition he was making and his team was making. Unfortunately, the authority to take the shot of removing him was with such people. So the stakeholder engagement was very poor, and he paid the price for that. And you know what happened in the next generation? In early 90s, they had again assembled the team for the second generation of Taurus, the development, product development. The project manager was very, very clear from the day one, I will finish this project in schedule. I don't want to risk my job. I will also finish it in project, that in budget, again, second positive. And he fully followed stakeholder expectation. If somebody said, a powerful guy said, the front needs to be in a particular way, he would do, without even doing so much of research on the aerodynamics, which could be practically impacting the fuel efficiency of the car. Just because somebody powerful said, no, I like this to be this way, or I know if you do a research, that's going to, the launch could be delayed by 6 months, I don't want you to spend time on that. He went with everything. And the rest is history. It was a terrible disappointment. Now, what were the negatives? He blindly followed the stakeholders' wish list, because those were not there, they were not entitled for the expectations. And he had no focus on the customer needs. He assumed that the earlier model was anyway a big hit in the market. Whatever he does is not going to be really changing so much in the market. But unfortunately, he did not understand what other competitors were doing. So they were also equally smart. So they came up with really smart stuff, and this thing did not come up well. And he was busy in engaging with the powerful stakeholders probably, and he did not have that right level of engagement with the vendors. So obviously, poor teamwork and poor product. So this is a simple example between a great job not sold well and something average which was sold perfectly well, but the ultimate outcome was not good. So that is a simple example I have taken. Now I want to just summarize the whole thing as two takeaways. There could be multiple, but I just wanted to summarize two key takeaways from this thing. Project management is more than 80% communication. We all know. And to me, most of it is with the stakeholders rather than your own team, immediate team, because your immediate team normally know what you expect from them. You know what they can do, what they cannot do. It is your own team. But when it comes to stakeholders, whether it is internally within an organization or externally, that is where you need to spend your time. That is where the real game is. And that is where most of your communications have to be effective. Then I have one more takeaway. I hear this thing, many project and risk managers say, risk management is the way others do project. You will see this thing. But to me, stakeholder engagement is a way in which sophisticated adults do the project. It's not just adults. Sophisticated people understand the soft side of stakeholder management and connect it to the harder realities, which are the commercial advantage and the final outcome from the project. So that is why I say sophisticated adults do it differently. They don't follow the crowd. They do it differently. And people may or may not recognize it when they are on the journey, but it will be very visible when they finish the journey. And you need to show the patience for the journey all throughout with firm and polite approach with every stakeholder you need to work with. And everybody making negative remark, tell yourself, no worries. If somebody is not going to make a lasting damage on your thing, no worries. Time will prove that your decisions are right. And you have kept the right people informed and engaged. So they will not come on your way with half-cooked information and half-completed status with their own perceived understanding and conclusions, and make a damage to yourself. So this is what it is. I've done my part, and I would love to have questions as much as I can handle within the next whatever time is allotted to me. And the balance could be handled by the AACE India team. Obviously, they would send it to me, and I will answer each and every one of them with the deserving attention. Thank you so much for the time, AAC, and I'm happy to take the questions.